Donald Trump is the Grand Marshal of the 2020 Daytona 500. Hi, I'm Marky Billson, and I think this is going to do more for NASCAR than it will for Donald Trump, but it's the second time that a president has attended the Daytona 500. The first time was in 1979, greatest Daytona 500 ever, and Jimmy Carter attended that race, and it made the race. It was the first time the Daytona 500 was ever televised live in its entirety. This was back in 1979 on CBS. But having the president there really made the race. And ever since then, it has been televised live in its completion. It became the Super Bowl of stock car racing, the Daytona 500. And for a period of time, it was the premier sporting event in February. Now that's the Super Bowl, certainly. But yes, having the president there made the Daytona 500. Now NASCAR is losing fans, but having Donald Trump come to their race, that's going to shore up their traditional fan base, because the NASCAR dad, that, right-winger that we heard talked about so much in presidential elections a decade ago, they've, I think, kind of been disassociated with the sport. I mean, NASCAR was at one time the last bastion for tobacco advertising, rebel flags. They've taken them away, and with that, it has created some division and some association, certainly within, say, Southern culture, Southern heritage people who loved NASCAR. It was their sport, tobacco farmers, what have you. Folks, I'm doing this from Johnson City, Tennessee. I remember those pickup trucks going to the big burly tobacco warehouse with the bumper sticker, "Tobacco money paid for this," with a rebel flag in the window. You don't think that disassociating yourself with those two entities has caused a division among NASCAR's fan base? You're sadly mistaken. So Donald Trump, as the Grand Marshal, is an attempt to restore that base. Now, it has been effective for political candidates to associate themselves with NASCAR. Back in 2000, George W. Bush was running for president, and he campaigned at the Daytona International Speedway. He said, "Gentlemen, start your engines," not before the Daytona 500, but the Pepsi 400, which was run in prime time Saturday night on CBS on July 1st, 2000. So not only did 100,000 people, most of them probably from Florida, in the crowd, I think we can safely say they were from Florida, it's the Daytona 500, not only were there 100,000 people in the stands that day who saw George Bush give the call, or heard him for that matter, say, "Gentlemen, start your engines," but you had the TV audience as well. And you cannot tell me that in that crowd of 100,000, plus how many other Floridians were looking on watching the race on TV, that there weren't 600 people among them who said, "Hey, that guy running for president, he's one of us." And that influenced them to go to the polls, where maybe if they weren't that interested in politics before, they would have said, just a same old presidential election. No, now he's one of us. 600. That's all it took to win Florida. I think that's where Bush got those votes. Now, Trump as the Grand Marshal, I don't think is going to make or break him in this presidential election. I really don't, but I am intrigued to see if, say, the Democrat nominee will make appearances at the NBA Finals to shore up his fan base, especially if the Milwaukee Bucks are the Eastern Conference champs. Then that's a swing state. You've got, that audience going for it. That could be something to watch. But what if it's the Toronto Raptors? What if they repeat as the Eastern Conference champs? And what if the presidential candidate, does go to Toronto to make an appearance? I'm here to see this grand, American game and all this. And it's legitimate. And you're certainly trying to attract your base on TV, on the national TV audience. But you know what it also looked like? It looked like when presidential candidates from Mexico go and campaign in Los Angeles. And you've got to wonder if that would be looked upon as a help or a hindrance if a presidential candidate did that, campaigning in Canada during the NBA Finals, potentially. So could Toronto winning the Eastern Conference this year, could the Raptors winning the conference, if they do, mean a presidential candidate will have less of an opportunity to shore up his base than his opposition will? Very intriguing to think. But here's the final question. Has auto racing, and for that matter basketball, become so associated with one side of the political coin that they are limiting their fan bases and are doomed to become cult sports? It's hard to argue that right now that's not